In the space of a single breath, the bells that welcome you become a soundtrack for a trial. The metal at your temple tastes like cold iron and salt, not triumph. The gowns, the music, the velvet seats all become props in a ritual that names you asset, not person. The stories you learned as a child promised rescue and romance. They forgot the clauses, the bargains, the punishments written by men who weighed dynasties in ledger books. Today you will meet 7 queens who survive brutal abuse inflicted by kings, and you will learn how survival looked when the law, the court, and medicine all sided against a woman. Before we begin, if you want more history that pulls back the curtain on power, hit like and subscribe. It helps keep these voices alive. Now imagine the pressure of copper and gold. Imagine the smell of wax and old wood. Imagine being counted not for your heart, but for your womb. We will look at cases from across continents and centuries, from a queen who outlived palace beatings to another who outmaneuvered public spectacle. Expect names and faces you know, and some you do not, but above all, expect truth that upends the glitter of a crown. If you think coronas equal freedom, prepare to change your mind. The system that sold daughters like cattle begins with contracts and tables. In rooms lit by tallow and later by candles, the men who arrange marriages speak in numbers. They discuss dowries, military aid, the precise number of knights to be mustered, and then they reduce a child to clauses about childbirth, obedience, and behavior. In one negotiation, Lord Mortimer argues about land, Sir Geoffrey pushes for custody of heirs, and Archbishop Thomas quietly notes what the church expects from a wife to avoid a scandal. You can hear linen scrape and the scratch of quill on parchment. You can smell ink and the cold sweat of the negotiators, and you can see the girl whose hand is on sale learning to answer with a bow before she has learned to say no. Contracts become instruments of coercion when they specify penalties for failure to produce. Then, when a king demands obedience, those same documents provide the legal scaffolding for confinement and punishment. Lady Agnes remembers being passed from guardian to guardian, her braids still damp from a morning bath, the taste of boiled barley on her tongue, the weight of expectation on her shoulders, and the sound of a counselor saying, quote, "A dynasty cannot wait on sentiment," unquote. Those negotiations show how policy begins with paperwork and becomes domestic brutality. Treaties and marital clauses read like cold arithmetic. A treaty can specify that a bride may be returned if she does not bear a son within a set time, or that the bride will forfeit certain lands if she displeases the consort. These are not metaphors. They are clauses read in Latin and in French that land in a woman's lap like a verdict. Consider one clause that assigns guardianship of children to the paternal line, thereby making a mother politically dispensable. You can hear the kiss of papery leaves, smell the dust of archives, and feel the sharp edge of a signature that decides whether a queen becomes mother or prisoner. When Catherine seeks to argue a point with her husband in private, she is met with silence, then with a sentence from an advisor. The treaty binds you to accept the household. She replies, quote, "Am I a household item to be accepted?" unquote. He answers, quote, "You are the instrument of succession," unquote. The legal language trains minds to see bodies as means, and that training turns cruelty into policy. Pause briefly, and if what you are hearing disturbs you, take a moment to respond. If this story moves you, write in the comments, start your line with "my reaction," and say 1 or 2 words: anger, disbelief, sorrow. Your reactions help other viewers find this material and guide what histories we should probe next. Now let us return to the palace, where surveillance is as routine as prayer. In the great houses, watchfulness becomes architecture. Rooms have corners designed to overhear. Bedchambers have curtains embroidered by women who double as informants. The queen meets with a lady-in-waiting, and their conversation is tight, layered with unspoken caution. The scene is lit by a single candle that pools wax on the sill. You hear the rustle of brocade, the click of a ring on a table, the low whisper of breath, and the faint scrape of a slipper on flagstone. The queen says, quote, "They listen through the walls," unquote. The lady replies, quote, "They always listen," unquote. A chamberlain named Thomas slips in and says, quote, "Forgive me, your grace, but the king asked for news," unquote. The queen answers, quote, "Tell him there is news of me in the chapel, not in the bedchamber," unquote. Thomas insists, quote, "He prefers the bedchamber report," unquote. The queen, voice low, quote, "Then he prefers command more than company," unquote. Thomas, with a smile that is a blade, quote, "Command is the duty of a consort," unquote. The lady-in-waiting and the queen exchange another secret sentence, and the tension tightens so that the candle flame seems to shrink. This scene has 6 exchanges, and each word is a test. You taste dust on your tongue as you listen, see shadows pace the walls, hear a distant hound baying as if the castle inhales unease. Lady Eleanor, who has served 3 queens, watches the exchange and files the queen's words away as if they might become evidence for a later plea. Physical violence moves from private incident to normalized control when courts decide that discipline is necessary for order. The king who strikes his wife in a fit is defended by ministers who argue tradition and decorum. In a public audience, the queen's cheek is reddened, the embroidery of her sleeve crushed by a palm that claims the right to correct. A physician named Dr. Ambrose examines the bruises and is told by a steward to record the injuries as accidental. You feel the roughness of linen against swollen skin. You hear the queen's breath hitch. You smell the oil used to soothe wounds. You see a window shutter rattle with the gossip that will never be spoken aloud. A table of courtiers murmurs, Lord Mortimer saying, quote, "Her temper provoked him," unquote. Lady Agnes replies, quote, "She was only reading aloud the treaty," unquote. The queen speaks once, voice small, quote, "I asked for mercy," unquote. The king says, voice loud, quote, "Mercy is not a policy," unquote. The crowd leans in like a beast, and the incident becomes precedent. Executions and beatings that seem personal are absorbed into the code of governance because they maintain an order that protects inheritance at the expense of a woman's body. Pregnancy is a battlefield where medicine and monarchy clash. The queen's body is rehearsed as a factory for heirs, and obstetrics practice can shift from care to containment the moment a fetus is deemed more valuable than a mother. Imagine a labor room lit by rushlight, the smell of boiled herbs, the metallic tang of instruments, the damp heat of a bedchamber crowded with midwives and surgeons. Dr. Ambrose argues to save the child. Archbishop Thomas counters about the rights of lineage, and the king stands at the foot of the bed measuring his own loss. The queen begs, quote, "Save me first," unquote. The surgeon answers, quote, "The law values the heir," unquote. A forceps-like clamp appears, cold on the skin, the sound of cloth clutched. A midwife named Agnes weeps in a corner, and the result is an operation that leaves a woman hollowed. Sensory detail surrounds you, the pull of rope, the metallic glint, a scent of alcohol used to wash hands, the groan that merges with the creak of a stretcher. The survival rate for women in labor in many eras is thin, and when prestige is on the line, choices are made. Jane is the name of one queen who gave birth and did not leave that chamber whole. Her voice after the birth soft and cracked as if someone had opened a book of laws and read only the titles. Now 3 moments of tension that refract what survival required. The first moment. A public procession designed to celebrate a wedding becomes a parade of humiliation. The crowd presses close, the air thick with roasted meat and human breath. Someone hurls a rumor through the ranks, and it becomes a chant that grows teeth. The queen hears the chant and falters because the chant calls her barren, though she is with child. Her husband stands at the balcony and does not move. Her ladies whisper, the scent of perfume masking sweat, and her hand clutches a glove until leather creaks. This moment lasts like a held breath and forces decisions that will echo for years. The second moment. In a dim room, a confession is demanded, not in court, but by the king alone. The queen is accused of infidelity, and the accusation is a tool to remove her influence. Candles gutter. The texture of the table under her fingertips is rough. She tastes iron on her tongue when she is forced to swallow a lie to survive. The king alternates between pleading and fury, offering reconciliation as bait. She chooses silence and later uses the silence as armor. The third moment. A legal hearing that functions as a public spectacle. The procession of judges is slow, the smell of vellum strong. A crowd gathers outside. The queen is escorted in by 3 guards whose boots pound the floor in a rhythm like a drum. She is forced to wear a veil, and the veil becomes a symbol of both protection and erasure. Witnesses named by the king testify with rehearsed voices. Her allies are pushed out, names like Sir Geoffrey and Lady Eleanor called away. For an hour the queen sits under interrogation, the air in the hall heavy with the sound of a single pendulum. Each of these moments measures courage, not by heroics, but by the small resistances that keep a woman breathing and plotting. There are women who learn to survive by making impossible choices. One queen, whom chroniclers call Margaret, negotiates with her enemies by offering marriage alliances for her son while hiding letters in the sole of her slipper. Another, named Isabella, learns secret ways to read ciphered letters, meeting conspirators under the guise of embroidery. Catherine de' Medici in a later court uses salons, poison rumors, and patronage as currency to keep her children on thrones. Mary Stuart employs legal maneuvering and raw stubbornness, refusing exile, returning to claim rights by sheer will. Eleanor of Aquitaine rides into campaigns and negotiates with barons, sometimes using her physical presence as a lever. These strategies require moral compromises. In a long backstory, we see one protagonist who represents many survivors. Born to a minor noble house, she learns to read in a cloister where candle smoke tastes of wet wood and ink. As a girl, she watches her father sign away land to save a title, the scrape of pen and the clink of coins meaning more than a father's embrace. Her adolescence is a series of tutors, of whispered instructions from an aunt named Lady Agnes, and of a marriage arranged when she is barely past childhood. She enters a foreign court that smells of pine and liver, where the king flings fruit at banquets and the courtiers laugh like crows. She loses a child, and the court treats the event as a political failure. She learns that silence is survival, and that a letter hidden in a spindle can carry a life-saving plea. In 3 paragraphs that sketch her childhood, education, and the moment of her loss, the reader senses why she grows into a woman who can endure. Later, she will use poetry, patronage, and alliances with clerics like Archbishop Thomas to survive long enough to see her grandson crowned. Dialogue becomes a subtle war in the scenes where survival is practiced. In one chamber, the queen, her steward, a judicial advisor, a doctor, a lady-in-waiting, and the king meet. The exchange runs for 8 turns. The queen says, quote, "I need someone to speak for me," unquote. The steward answers, quote, "You can speak for yourself," unquote. The advisor interjects, quote, "The realm cannot be placed at risk for private matters," unquote. The doctor says, quote, "Her health is fragile, counsel must account." The lady-in-waiting whispers, quote, "They will listen to the king more than to your pulse," unquote. The king laughs, quote, "My ear is the ear of the state," unquote. The queen leans forward, voice steady, quote, "Then let this ear hear truth," unquote. The advisor, with a soft dismissal, quote, "Truth is measured by law," unquote. The tactile scrape of fabric, the metallic clink of a spoon, the smell of stew and ink combine to make each line feel like a test of nerve. In another exchange between the queen and an ally named Sir Geoffrey, the dialogue runs 6 lines and resolves in a coded plan to smuggle letters, the rust of parchment and the warmth of a pressed hand sealing a pact. Execution and public spectacle are tools of statecraft. When the law decides to remove a queen publicly, the performance is engineered to deter. There are planks, platforms, a crowd that eats and complains, and a procession that lace the event with both ritual and humiliation. The person forced to stand is taught to speak a final line that will placate the public. The rope and blade are framed as instruments of justice, not private revenge. You smell wood smoke, the stench of unwashed bodies, the tang of iron. People sell sausages while watching a sentence. Some queens survive such spectacles through exile, through bargaining with foreign courts, through marriages arranged after the fall from immediate favor. The spectacle is both punishment and demonstration that the sovereign can remove even the highest of women from power. Survival often demands commitments that look like betrayal. Catherine de' Medici chose poison as a rumor to weaponize. One queen chooses to name an adulterer for political gain to preserve her son. Another renounces claims to her own lands to secure the future of a nephew. Joanna chooses to live enclosed, learning to turn prayer into political currency. These pragmatic moral failures are not simple. They are bargains struck under duress, and they leave scars deeper than any wound. The queen who barters away a title in exchange for her safety returns to her chambers to find the pillow still warm from a night of crying. Scent of her tears absorbed into the linen. She has made a covenant with necessity, and in that choice she keeps a lineage alive at the price of her own claims. At the end, we must reflect on what these stories tell us about our moment. The cost paid by these 7 queens is both a historical record and a mirror. Today, laws in many places protect autonomy in ways unthinkable to their contemporaries, but echoes remain. Systems that trade bodies for advantage still exist in other guises. When you encounter debates about reproductive rights, about guardianship, about who controls a body and why, remember these histories. They show how institutions can bend medical practice, law, and ritual to preserve power. They show how women navigated those bends with cunning, with cruelty at times, with grace, with survival instinct that felt like treason to some and like bravery to others. If this investigation mattered to you, share it, subscribe, and tell one friend. Your engagement helps bring research into light and fuels the work that uncovers letters, the smell of ink, the details that make history human. When you look at a crown in a museum, do not admire only the metal. Think of the gloves, the letters hidden in shoes, the midwife named Agnes who kept secrets, the Dr. Ambrose who had to choose, the steward who recorded injuries, the peasants who watched, and the queens who survived by silence and calculation. Remember Margaret, Isabella, Catherine, Mary, Eleanor, Joanna, and the unnamed women whose names the archives muffled. Their survival reshaped succession, law, and what women could demand from power. The crown gleams, but it is a ledger too. If this story lodged in you, comment with "my reaction" and one word. Share it with someone who loves history. Subscribe for more excavations of power, and remember this line, carry it with you. A crown is a promise to a realm, but often a sentence for the person who must wear it.